Hello and welcome again to another episode of the Indoor Environment Show. I'm Bob Krell, founder and publisher of Healthy Indoors Media, and as always, joined by my co-host, Mr. Don Weeks, who is the president of the Indoor Environmental Quality Global Alliance, IEQGA. Hi, Don.
Hi, Bob. How you doing?
Good. You know, it's Friday.
It's Friday, and we're almost through September, so it's moving along quickly.
Fast. This year's going way too fast. And it's cold here, and my, not that it has any bearing on anything, but my furnace is out in my house, and we're waiting on parts.
Oh boy!
So at least I'm not up in Canada like you. I mean, I can survive. I won't freeze to death this weekend, but
I got the snow blower all fixed. I've got it fixed. The snow blower. It's all delivered, ready to go anytime the snow starts.
Oh boy! Anyway,
this is better than a Monday.
Yeah, I think so. But I'm biased. Anyway, great guest today. Great topic. So I'll let you give the background on our guest of the day.
Okay. Hi, Michelle. Michelle Twilley has over 34 years of environmental, industrial hygiene, cancer, and non-cancer risk assessments, as well as health and safety consulting experience related to the testing and inspection of the built environment for a variety of occupational and environmental hazards and indoor air quality concerns. Michelle is currently AIHA staff CIH, Certified Industrial Hygienist, and she's, in the meantime, has been earning a doctorate of public health from the Bloomberg School of Public Health at Johns Hopkins University. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's great to be here, that you're here. We appreciate it. So let's get started with some of these questions. First one, let me pull it up here, relates to your educational background in natural science, public health, environmental health, and risk assessments. Now, with all of that, how did you become interested in industrial hygiene?
So I started out as an environmental scientist, and I did a lot of work for the military, a lot of subsurface investigation, a lot of hazardous waste site remediation projects. And there was always this requirement for a health and safety plan that was prepared by an industrial hygienist. So as I started learning more and more about it, I realized it was an interesting profession, and I started getting some training. I had worked with other industrial hygienists. I thought what they did was really very interesting, and they were also really good at problem solving. And that just really spoke to me. So 10 years after I received my Bachelor's of Science in Natural and Environmental Science, I went to the Johns Hopkins University and received my Master's in Health Science and Environmental Health Science, Industrial Hygiene and Safety. And it's been a wonderful career ever since. And while I was at Johns Hopkins, I was introduced to the science and public policy aspect of the EPA, and then I returned to school to receive my doctorate in public health and environmental health sciences. So it's been every 10 years I got a degree, and then finally when it came time to do another one, it was like, no, I'll just continue on as a life learner.
Well, you certainly have done that. Go ahead, Bob.
So you wear multiple hats though. So you're the staff CIH for the American Industrial Hygiene Association, AIHA, but you also you founded ARIA Environmental. So you do work as a private consultant too, right? So yeah,
I came up through the consulting business. I worked for a number of engineering firms, and in 2003 I started ARIA Environmental. It was just because while I was in college, I was doing a lot of side work for people. And at one particular point in time, I had done a multi-week survey of a National Guard facility in Virginia. And the person who I was working for said, well, who do I pay? And I was like, you pay me. Why would you pay somebody else? He goes, no, is it going to go to you or to your company? I said, well, I don't have a company. He said, you should. And in that moment, the ARIA was born.
Excellent. We met at Nashville at AIHCE back in that was 2022, right?
Mhm.
That was the first live one post-COVID. And
Yes.
and you, as you'd mentioned in the pre-show, you had just really come on that staff position on AIHA. So lots happened since then, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So 2 years in, and I can say it is a very exciting time for AIHA as we are working on initiatives to advance the science and the practice of industrial hygiene. A lot of what AIHA has done in the past is all about the skills and the knowledge that industrial hygienists need to do their job. And now we're looking at what industrial hygienists do when they are actually in the field or on the shop floor and making decisions in real time.
Skewerly Brian.
Sorry.
It's a live show. Honestly, we've had guests have cats walk across their desk.
Oh.
During COVID, it was especially interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Certain
Mine,
things that happen.
2 cats and 2 dogs, so somebody's bound to make an appearance.
I'm sure they will, but they'll be welcome. We're pet friendly on this show.
Good.
So you mentioned a staff industrial hygienist, a certified industrial hygienist. That was a new position, wasn't it, when you took it? I don't remember having a staff in CIH before. Can you describe exactly how that evolved?
Actually, we did have CIH before. We had wonderful staff, and there was a period of time when that position was vacant. So that's probably what you're thinking about. In a couple of years, there was a bit of a hiring freeze, and that position just hadn't been filled. There were a couple of people that served in the role, not as CIH, but as a staff scientist. Mm-hmm. And then ultimately the board decided that it was time to bring on a certified industrial hygienist again, as not only to work in these scientific initiatives, but also to have a member representative within the organization.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. I mean, basically, I remember there was technical directors and staff scientists, mm-hmm. but never a title specifically CIH. That was what I was looking for. And so you're basically the first that I'm aware of that has that specific title. Yes. So could you kind of describe what your responsibilities are in that regard?
Okay. So most of what I do is serve as a liaison with some of our technical initiatives. When I first came on, I was working mostly with the Defining the Science initiative, which is our attempt at our first ever research agenda, and to identify those things that are barriers to practice in establishing our best-in-class practice. I work with the Technical Initiatives Strategic Advisory Group. I also manage almost all of the activities that are occurring in AIHA's Guideline Foundation, and that would be the Standards Advisory Panel, the Emergency Response Planning Guidelines Working Group. We just changed the name like last week, so that's a new one, and the Standards of Care Initiative. So those are big projects. I also am working on the, and I should have checked myself when I said standards of care. It's now called the Principles of Good Practice Initiative. There has been a name change, and we can talk about that a little bit. I also work on the state of the art versus state of the practice survey. And that is a very large survey that we just received results from and are really excited to dig in and distill what those findings are, the key findings from that survey. So there's quite a bit. I also spent some time writing blog posts or journal articles. So not, as a, with a lot of help from the Synergist authors. Thank you to them. Let me see, what else do I do? I go throughout the community and help with speaking engagements. I just got back from Denver last week where I presented on the emergency response planning guidelines to the Rocky Mountain local section. So there's quite a bit of activity in this job.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're not too sedentary, and you still have ARIA environmental too.
So Aria is being transitioned over to one of the senior project managers there, and that is very exciting to turn that over and let it go into its future under new leadership and ownership.
Yeah, with all the responsibilities of AIHA, it would be difficult to also do ARIA, I would think.
No, it's impossible. There's, I thoroughly, I mean, it's my baby. I love that, what we've done and all that we've built, but it is something that, I was thinking a few years ago about my exit strategy and how that would look, especially, I want to retire and at some point. So, I needed to start that process earlier rather than later because it always takes longer.
Excellent. Oh, yeah. I mean, go ahead, Bob.
I was going to say my exit strategy for my companies is death, but
I
mean, no, I'm not rushing it or anything.
No,
I think I'm going to work. I'm going to work till the grave. I think.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
I was going to say that I've already worked to the grave because I basically have retired. And
first of all, you haven't retired. Stop that.
But it is a lengthy process, as you mentioned, and it can take a long time. So I wish you the best with that, and I wish the people taking over the best as well. So
they're doing great. In fact, I think that was the phone call that came in was the principal who was taking over the business. So it happens.
Yeah, tell them to get to watch the video and get an extra audience. That's okay with us.
Yeah.
So you're here for the four new strategic initiatives from AIHA, right? I mean, that's really the bottom line here. So we'll bring that right up, right?
Great, thank you. Yes, so each of these four initiatives has a different goal or approach to them. The most senior of the initiatives, which is chaired by Don Weeks, by the way, is the Defining the Science initiative. And this is where we're establishing our national research agenda. The first version of the agenda was published the end of last year, and we have 3 new ideas that have been submitted by our members to add to the second version of the agenda. So this is a joint project between AIHA and ACGIH. So it's really a nice marriage of the two entities. We are, like I said, in our maturation process with this group. I would say we were pretty well in a norming phase, and it's the content is pretty massive if you think about it. We have the research agenda. We have a series of brainstorming sessions that we have hosted most recently on thermal stress, and those are published to our members guide. And then we have a listing of barriers to practice that are in an Excel format, and we encourage our members and our committees to review those barriers and figure out projects that they can undertake to overcome that obstacle or that barrier.
So the research agenda is available for free. People can download that?
Absolutely. It's on the AIHA website, and it is available for free. And we encourage people to review it, share it with students, share it with people that might be funders of research, share it with other research entities. It's just, it really is our profession's voice of what we need.
Right. And we will continue to have evolving needs. You mentioned heat stress. Obviously, that's a major issue from this past summer. Yes. But there's also things such as wildfires and pandemics. I'm going to mention a few things that have come up.
You put an S on pandemic, too. That's
yeah, that's right.
Scary.
It's very possible. I mean, my wife is having COVID-19 right now. She's in bed because she got sick this past week. So, I mean, it's still out there. And but this initiative is specifically for defining the science that leads to additional research. And maybe, Michelle, you could talk about the research to practice and practice to research ability that we've trying to expand.
Yeah, certainly. So it became apparent that there were two different areas where we had research to practice, which this is how we adapt modern research or what's available to incorporate in our practices, versus the practice to research, which is where we're defining the needs that we face in our day-to-day operations that we could use research to overcome. So the research agenda is divided in those two modes, and it is certainly a great way to look at our needs, our niche.
Well, we've all basically have grown up in a world where we had researchers who were doing very interesting and very important research, but wasn't necessarily something that the practitioners could definitely use. Mm-hmm. So the idea here is to have a loop that we provide information from our practices to the researchers, who then take that and do the research, and then comes back and improves the profession by having more information coming from the research. Mm-hmm. That's basically how I think we're planning to use it in that regard. So, anything else you can tell us about the Define the Science initiative at this point, and how would somebody become interested? Who is interested, and how would they become involved?
Yeah, it's great. If you go to the AIHA website under Advancing the Science Initiatives, you can click on the Defining the Science, and you will see several radio buttons. And this is where you can download a copy of the research agenda. You can submit a research idea. We welcome those ideas, where the Defining the Science Advisory Group would then review the ideas and either ask for further clarification. There's going to be a feedback loop. We have the ability for you to also review existing research ideas and provide your comment. So there's certainly an opportunity there. We welcome that feedback. Within AIHA, we have our research and development officers, R&D officers. It's a new officer position within the committee structure, and they are specifically tasked with being a reviewer on ideas that are submitted, but they are also hopefully helping us get that valuable feedback from their point of view, their expertise in their area of practice. And so there's a lot of ability to communicate in this process. So if you are interested in taking a look at these ideas and providing feedback, you do not have to be an AIHA member to access the content. It is certainly freely available. And if you have any questions, I'm always available to reach out to and contact on the initiatives. I think my name is on and email contact is on each one of these initiatives in the webpage.
Great. Yeah. Now, you mentioned technical committees. Is it also extended to local sections as well?
So right now it is living in the technical committee world. We do go out and present updates on the Advancing the Science topics, and we have QR codes baked in. So a local section or a student local section or anybody seeing the content can just take a quick scan of that QR code and reveal all the data for themselves. Okay,
thank you. Let's talk now about the new name. You'll have to tell me what it is. Principles of
Good Practice.
Is that Good Practice? Okay, strategic initiative. And what is the purpose of this initiative?
So the Principles of Good Practice is a system where we want to elevate the practice of industrial hygiene or occupational hygiene using the tried and true documentation that is available. We can look at, it's kind of a beyond compliance approach. So we have compliance as a baseline. We have to comply with all the laws and regulations. That's just required. But now what we're looking at is whether or not those laws and regulations are sufficient to adequately protect worker health. So what we've done is asked our volunteer groups and our committees to take a look at their subject matter and think about what the good practice to apply is, and then also think about it in terms of best practice. So envision it as a roadmap as we work through each of the domains under occupational hygiene. We will come up with a checklist that people can go to and say, all right, here's where I'm practicing. Here's where I probably should be for good practice, or here's where I can get to in best practice, and just have those resources. So what happens with this process is there are references and resources to guidance documents, standards, work practices, and the like that are already published. Some of them are peer reviewed, some of them are consensus standards, some of them are not, but they are all in the opinion of the people who are developing these guidelines or these principles of good practice, going to get you to a better level of practice.
So, go ahead, Bob.
Oh, no, I just
popping in, are you? Okay, good to see you.
I'm here.
It's a crazy day. I'm sorry. It's a little bit crazy day, but anyway.
I mentioned we have no heat here, so it's like I'm just freezing.
Yes. All right. So you mentioned these working groups, and including, I think there's 6 of them, and including one for an indoor environmental quality. And as you know, this program is more oriented towards that than for the overall industrial hygienist. Mm-hmm. So will there be publications issued from each of these work groups in the future, specifically on indoor air quality or anything else that's related to that?
Under the principles of good practice, yes. So right now we have completed the exposure assessment strategies, PGP. We are working with the noise committee on a noise and hearing loss prevention PGP document. We are working with the respiratory protection committee, and we have reached out and are starting to work with the indoor air quality committee. That is, they're defining terms at this point in time. So they are moving forward with their work. We have reached out to the sampling and analytical laboratory group, and I'm trying to think, leadership and management. So we hope that in 5 years, we'll be able to work through all of the technical aspects of the practice.
And there'll be publications from each of those groups, which will be available to download?
Yes, absolutely. These are all available to download. It will be one document with a series of appendices for each of the domains.
That's good. Now, I mean, it's great that they're going to have, it sounds like 6 publications. But as you know, all our publications become out of date in a period of time. I'm wondering if there's a plan to keep this particular initiative going so that, say, every 3 years, we might update these documents.
So that's the beauty of this. It's an evergreen process, and the committees that develop their initial principles of good practice are tasked with the care and maintenance and feeding of them as well. So they will be working on them to update them as new content becomes available, or as they see fit to keep the material fresh. It's the beauty of living in the digital technology age. Yeah,
that's true. And it makes it a lot easier for people to get valuable information without necessarily having to spend a lot of money. One of the new initiatives seem to be downloadable on an easy basis. So that's I'm really looking forward to seeing these. So you know when the first one may be coming out?
Like I said, the EASC has already completed theirs. It came out earlier this year, so that's already to go. We are hoping to bring the noise and hearing loss prevention across the finish line by the end of this year, and it looks like the Respiratory Protection Committee is targeting Q1 of 2024.
Good. All right, so they're moving along pretty well. Anything else you can tell us about that initiative?
Well, we did have a name change, so that was something.
Tell us about that.
So it was originally, what's in a name? We had difficulty coming up with a name, and we just kept calling it the Standards of Care Initiative, and that met with some concerns over some of our members that, these are not standards. We are not doing a consensus standard, but it's the opinion of our members of certain committees that are saying that these are best practices. So we went through our legal department. Our legal counsel did not have any issue with calling it standards of care, but in deference to some of our members who were really concerned about calling it that and any potential for it being misconstrued as a consensus standard, the then Standard of Care Advisory Group convened and reviewed several alternate names and selected Principles of Good Practice as the appropriate name for this activity.
That makes sense too, because I mean, standards of care is, of course, that would be like the buzz term. That's how people would always refer to things. But obviously, when you use the word standard in a title, it pretty much implies it's a standard.
Right.
That makes sense.
Now, we do reference standards in this document. We do reference, guidelines and recommendations. So overall, it's, like I said, a roadmap to help a practitioner identify areas where they can improve their existing practice and protect worker health.
Yeah, I think that's good to keep that in mind, that that's the purpose of this, is not necessarily to set a standard, but to give guidance to people who are starting, either need it because they're just starting in the industry, or that they, looking back on what they want to do and to improve what they're doing. This would be the type of documents. This would be a guidance document rather than a you shall do type of document.
Right. Correct.
Good. All right. So the third initiative is the state-of-the-art versus practice. Can you give us a little bit of an overhead of what that's all about?
Sure. So we just talked about principles of good practice. So as these are developed, we're then going to go out and do a survey of our membership and others. It goes beyond the U.S. To look at what people are actually doing in their practice. So it's not what you need to know, which is a big change in what we've traditionally done. It goes to what are people actually doing? You know how to do the job, but what do you do in actuality? And so we launched our first state-of-the-art versus state-of-the-practice survey last summer. We had shared the survey with our English-speaking counterparts across the globe, and we had a very robust response. The survey results are posted to the AIHA website, and we are looking forward to a 4-page insert in the Synergist magazine coming in January. So it will be a nice outward-looking piece of what the survey results were. And then we have taken like the top 5 findings, and we want to look at mapping those against how we can improve. So you'll start to hear that these things link together. The principles of good practice feeds the state of the art versus state of the practice. The first one being exposure assessment related, and that feeds into improving exposure judgments. So it's all meshed together very well. And
can you share some of the conclusions of the survey at this point?
I sure can. Not surprising. We are finding that people are not dividing their workforce into similar exposed groups prior to their sampling and analysis strategy as much as we would think that they would. They are not applying statistical tools frequently. We have powerful tools for small sample sets, using the Bayesian decision analysis. And what's interesting is people are still reporting that they need more data, more sampling to adequately use statistical tools. So those are some high-level findings. We really would love to find a researcher or maybe some students who would like to dig into this data set and mine it for all the areas where we can improve. But just hitting those highlights is going to take years.
Well, I think so. Yeah. So it's sort of set up as a well, not opposite. It's certainly not the same thing. When you say this is called the state of the art versus the state of practice, is there specifically why there are, shall we say, differences between the state of the art and the state of the practice at this point?
Yes, that's what we're trying to drive from the Principles of Good Practice project. You have that mapping of the good practice and the best practice. So we use that mapping to generate the questions for the surveys. And then we just want to see where people fall in their actual practice.
So the practice is different than what should be, as you mentioned, they're not using the strategic or the various type of mechanisms and tools that are out there. Why do people shy away from using those tools, do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question, really.
Yeah, it is. And we asked that in the survey. So we have a variety of reasons. Don't know the tools exist, don't know how to use them, don't have management support, don't have time. We're just doing compliance, that's it. So there were many reasons why not. And that's, once we understand the why, we can go in and try to address how to get people to do that.
Was that a surprise when you did the survey? Those, coming to that conclusion, getting those results that people were saying they really weren't doing statistical analyses?
Yes and no. I think before we thought it was worse than it was. I think before we were thinking that nobody uses this, or very few people use it, and now we're seeing about 25% are responding that they use the tools, and we'd like to see that go up much more.
Well, all three of us have served in situations where the client is looking for an instant answer to these questions. And so you do sampling and they want to know within 5 minutes what their problem is.
Right.
That kind of, pushes it out in terms of how much statistical analysis you can actually do if that's the type of pressure you're under.
Right.
Doing this work for clients. So do you anticipate that type of relationship is going to change over a period of time? We certainly hope it does, but I guess I'm asking your expert opinion on that. It's hard to know for sure.
Right. It's you have that aha moment as you're practicing in the profession where you know intuitively that there's overexposures occurring at a facility, and how do you communicate that to the operating personnel or the management of that facility. And I found that using the tools, especially the graphics in the Bayesian decision analysis, have helped me convince the facility managers that, while the data indicates that there's not a compliance issue, there really is likely to be one. And I'll give you an example. In my practice with ARIA, I worked at a manufacturer that had, they wanted me to come in and do noise dosimetry. And so I went in and talked to them about, what we're going to do and where and who was at concern. And then they revealed to me that they had several threshold shifts occurring in the workforce. And they said, we don't understand because our monitoring data historically has been acceptable. And I go out and I go to the shop floor and I start to do the monitoring, and the next thing I know, everybody's leaving. And the facility manager had sent everybody home early ahead of a holiday and didn't tell anybody, the operations manager, anybody, that this was happening. So the results were quite biased because half the equipment wasn't running. So we came back in, repeated the monitoring, and looking at it, looking at the results, they were just under the OSHA thresholds for noise. And I was like, okay, so you're compliant, but, and I said, this is where I'm going with this. You have threshold shifts, you have hearing loss occurring, You're monitoring data, even though it looks like it's compliant. You weren't fully operational, even on the day we were monitoring, and the second day we were monitoring. I said, I just don't feel like you have good control of your noise sources. And I used the Bayesian to show them that they had a likelihood of an overexposure based on the data that we had. And he was like, okay, now I get it.
And that's interesting. You were able to do that. I mean, not everybody would have gotten to that second step. In many cases, the guy would have said, that's enough. I have the results I need. I'm going to move on. No. So briefly, I mean, not to get into a great deal of technical background, but could you briefly describe, for those who may not know, what you mean by Bayesian methods and Bayesian analysis?
Okay. So Bayesian decision logic is a statistical method that you can use with very small data sets. And it's very powerful in that you can assign some priors, some information that you have about how well controlled the work environment is for that exposure. And so you can give some qualitative input into the analysis of your data. And then you're using simulations with your couple of data points that you might have to come up with the distribution across various percentiles of control. So then you can look at it, it's like, oh, this is really well controlled, very highly likely to be below an occupational exposure limit that you have selected. Or on the other extreme is it's not likely very well controlled at all. And this ties nicely into the AIHA kind of steps for what's next. What do you do next? I'd love to give you a demonstration sometime of how this works in real time, but you are welcome to go to the AIHA Apps and eTools page, and you can link into IHStat, IHEST, or ExpoStats, and these powerful tools that will take you through that logic. They're all free. They're downloadable. And what's great about this is there are 9 hours of free web content that you can review and get CM points for. And then once you understand that content, you can sit for the EDA registry exam and become a exposure decision analyst, registered. This is all right now free of charge. And it's a great way to learn more about the tools. The content is fabulous. It is getting great reviews by all who've taken it. We are leaving that content as free for anybody to use up until we'll reassess in 2025. But right now it's free content. And the EDA registry exam is free. So we highly encourage people to learn more about it and give it a go.
Where would someone find that on the site, Michelle?
That is in the, let me see, click under public resources. You're putting me on the spot here.
I know, sorry, I shouldn't have done that.
That's okay. No, that's okay.
Yep. I'm getting all kinds of, okay.
Actually, go over to OEHS Professionals. There should be an Apps and eTools page. Apps, scroll down before.
Yep.
Click on that.
There. It's opening. Boy, it's like for high-speed internet here in our studio, it doesn't look really high speed right now.
So, I mean, how long is this this new qualification been in existence, Michelle? I'm sorry.
It's been around for quite some time, though. I believe some of our early registrants are from like 2017.
Oh, okay. So it's been around about 6-7 years now. Mm-hmm. And how many people have taken the exam?
So we are about 259 right now.
Wow. Okay. So quite a considerable number. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I assume most people, because they're taking the course, they're going through the materials. The intent is to basically qualify them.
Yes.
Not to disqualify them. So,
correct. Correct. It's again, there's a practice exam. The content is certainly it helps you understand the different tools and different approaches that you can use. When you take the EDA exam, you are given data sets and you work through whatever app that you want to work with or e-tool you want to work with, and then you plug in the data, and it goes through assessing the data for log normality and how you do that. It goes into looking at maybe you have two different SCGs that are being represented by the data, and some maybe you have to split those apart. It talks you through interpretation once you have the data analysis. So it's again, it's a wealth of information. It's great to learn about it. And then what's nice is, once you have that in your back pocket, you can either adopt it fully, or maybe you'll think about it sometime as, oh, I have this application. This is going to be perfect for it. Again, you can use very, very small data sets, an N of 1. And some people even argue an N of 0 to run through the Bayesian decision analysis.
So would this type of analysis be applicable to indoor air quality measurements?
Certainly. You can use it anywhere you have a log normally distributed data set. You can have small sample sizes. You have to come up with what your threshold value is going to be that you're going to use, and put that into the tool a priori.
The difficulty is just what you just mentioned, which is not everybody's agreeing as to what is the specific TLV that you should be using for indoor air quality at this point.
Exactly.
And so you have to choose that, and that might be difficult.
Right.
That's how we put it that way.
Yes.
For example, like mold.
Yes, exactly.
It's like, whoa, that's arbitrary.
Yes.
At this point.
But it's at least a tool that can start them down the right path and getting some type of statistical analysis of whether people were exposed or not. And I think that's important. The last little item on this one is I will hear a lot of talk from a lot of my colleagues that, yes, this is great to get all these statistics, but what you really need is professional judgment. Because unless you have that type of experience and knowledge, it doesn't matter what the numbers say, you can make a decision. So what's your thoughts about that? I know that our good friend John Mulhausen would probably blow a gasket on that particular question, but let me...
It's all fair. It's all fair because remember, we practice the art and science of occupational hygiene. So I say that all the time to people. It's like, you come to this with your experience and your toolkit and the wealth of information that you have at hand. And, we remember the basics. We work through the anticipate, recognize, evaluate, control, confirm paradigm. We take the inputs that we have available to us and we have to synthesize those somehow. So we can go back and use like the qualitative data analysis checklist. Now, thinking in terms of the SDM 2.0 tool that Susan Arnold and Mark Stencil and others have developed, and that is now housed at University of Minnesota at their website. But you can use those tools to make sure you're capturing the data that you need to then develop your sampling strategy and understand who your similar exposed groups are and your how you're going to sample and where and when and what your occupational exposure limit that you're selecting for that benchmark happens to be, what your confidence interval that you're looking for in your statistical testing. So there's quite a bit of nuance that goes into what we do that, I think you brought up John, I think you'd agree that it takes both. It's not just using the statistical tools, but it's having the foresight into the information you need to use those tools effectively.
Yeah, and that brings up something that you talked about, which is, before you do the sampling, you should have a discussion about what is your sampling strategy, what is your sampling plan, where do you intend to do the sampling, a whole, basically getting a whole plan together before you go out and start putting up pumps everywhere.
Exactly.
And so that brings me up to the fourth point, which is exposure assessment, which I think our good friend John is very much involved with, improving exposure judgment accuracy. Can you tell us what is the purpose of that particular initiative?
Yeah, so this is a joint initiative, again, between AIHA and ACGIH. It is a collaborative effort that has multiple project initiatives under it to improve exposure judgment accuracy. So when this started, we, AIHA, procured the services of a market research firm to help us understand the attitudes and perceptions of our colleagues on exposure judgment and barriers that they might face in implementing these methods. And that really had a great outcome. We had lots of information that came back both for and against the use of these tools. We have people that are very hard and set in compliance only mindset. Interestingly, though, we've talked to NIOSH and OSHA as part of this initiative, and they have been very open and receptive to these tools. NIOSH in particular, because they are not accustomed to using small data sets, and they are looking at how they can use these tools in their health hazard evaluation process. John Mulhausen was able to go to Cincinnati and give a lecture to the NIOSH personnel there and help them understand how these tools are used and, to be determined where they will go with it. And even OSHA representatives are looking at the tools and considering them as, a next step or a better way of performing their analysis. So there is some recognition there at the federal level. But going back to the project initiatives, we are working with the marketing campaign. This is a big culture shift initiative. We are finalizing some of the messaging that will come out around the IEJ project. And in the beginning of next year, we will start kind of our outreach and our campaign, if you will, out to membership. We do have a series of, we have a survey occurring right now. If you haven't participated in the survey and you are a member of AIHA or ACGIH, we strongly encourage you to do so. The survey will be coming from Q&A Associates. They are part of the IEJ consultant team that is working with us, and they are working towards crafting the materials that we're going to be using as part of our outreach. Going back and talking about the advisory group, our past chair was Stephen Yan. Our current chair is Kent Candy with ACGIH, and Stephanie Batista will be our next chair. They are leading probably, I think, a dozen or more project initiatives that are anything from members capturing their aha moment when they realize that these tools really made a difference in helping them tell the story that needs to be told and making changes within their facilities and their manufacturing plants. We have, just so many different things happening there, educational outreach materials, outreach back to students and colleges. We have, I'm going to do it in justice. There's just too many different parts to this project. So we have an advisory group, and the advisory group members are tasked with bringing their different initiatives forward, and they are reaching out and tapping other members of the association to help them. So it's kind of like a pyramid where we have the dozen or so initiatives, and then the trickle down into committee work and beyond. So it's really going well.
So concentrating on just the most recent one, the exposure, judgment, accuracy, you mentioned that it's a sort of a cultural shift or a paradigm shift from what people have been using previously, in terms of these tools and activities. How will this paradigm be accomplished in a way that the industrial hygienists in the field will use these tools?
Well, that's a good question. So that's why we are trying to get ahead of it with adequate training. I mean, going back to the survey we conducted about why people are not using the tools, what are the barriers? Time, buy-in from management, value, that they see, it's getting past those barriers. But one of the biggest two barriers actually that were presented were they don't know about the tools. So that's really getting to an awareness piece, but they don't know how to use them. So that's why the education and the training is out there. So like I said, it's all interconnected.
It is, yeah. And it's going to be a new era. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the era when we switched from TLVs to PELs, from having ACGIH come up with the TLVs, which were to be used with judgment, to the OSHA, permissible exposure limits, where there wasn't any discussion, either you were above or below. And so this is a new shift for a lot of industrial hygienists. For the younger, more, less experience in that, but just as good industrial hygienists, this is going to be a great new tool for them. For those of us who are a little bit older, I have a feeling we're going to miss the boat on this one. We've already been through one of these. So there's maybe a little bit more of a paradigm shift or cultural shift because of the generational shift that is taking place. And,
I really see people across all age groups adapting to this. I don't see that, you're going to have the people that this is how I do my assessment. This is how I've always done it. They may not want to think about that they possibly could have done better. That's something that, in my 35 years, I would hate to go back and look at some of my earlier work and think, oh, what was I thinking? I could have used this tool or method and I didn't. And now I didn't advise my client correctly, and that there is potential for overexposure and they could control them better. It's a shift, and it takes both a internal acceptance of something new, a new approach, a new process. I mean, these statistical methods are tried and true. They're vetted. They work. So it's it depends on where you're coming from. Is it your culture to constantly improve, or is your culture to just do good enough? Just get it done, check the box, move on. And so that's going to take a bit of a shift. But again, that inward piece where you're going to start challenging your skill set, and was I doing the right thing, and did I get the right result? And some of us don't like to look back at that, but it's part of the continuous improvement process.
Hindsight can be brutal.
Yeah.
But that's that's the whole evolution and learning process. You have to be able to critically assess what you've done. Just because we've always done something a certain way doesn't mean that's the best way to do it. And that's a brutal reality check sometimes.
It sure is. And we go through it in every facet of our life.
Yes, that's true. But one of the things that I think is difficult is it's not just us making the decision. It's our clients. It's sure. Various types of officers within a company that have no scientific background, but definitely want production to be up, and ongoing. So that type of paradigm shift requires that management buy in, that people who are regulators, as you say, OSHA and NIA seem to be buying into it, which is great. But it takes a lot of effort, and it's going to take a long time. It's not going to be something that happens overnight. That's for sure.
Absolutely. And this is a 10-year phased-in project. So we're not expecting miracles overnight. But one of the things, I go back to the art of the practice, and that is where you have those communication skills and strategies, and your stakeholders' needs are balanced in the context of what you're trying to accomplish. But if it's a tool that's going to help you communicate, understand your data and communicate better, then by all means, look into it and figure out how it would work within your organization. It might not work for you. And that's the, reality of it. Because, I came from this as a consultant. If I went into certain clients of mine and I said, hey, you need to do this, you're missing the boat, they're going to say, we just want you to collect the samples and give us the data. We'll make our own decisions. And that's fine too. I mean, you have to balance the needs of your client. It's interesting talking to people like John Mulhausen, who comes from a career at 3M, where he had direct responsibility for the shop floor. And you talk to people from the military who are very command and control. You're going to use this, check the box. And then you look at people like me that floated around in the consulting world, and my role as a consultant could be at a upper level management decision role, policies and procedures and process, or it could have been as simply we need noise monitoring. We don't know how to do it. Can you come in and do it for us? And then working with them to make sure that we have provided what they needed in a value added sort of context.
So I think that the difficulty is that there's a lot of people who are not necessarily CIHs, who are doing industrial hygiene, or calling themselves industrial hygienists. And they're, on that peripheral area of mold we've already mentioned, asbestos, lead, things like that, that are out there in the public, and not necessarily in the manufacturing facilities, but out in the public. And that requires a different type of strategy, I think, and communication. It'll be interesting to see the first time. I don't know if you know of this, but if anybody who's actually done some type of statistical analysis of samples taken at a clearance for asbestos abatement, that's that, and there are samples every day being taken all over the country and being utilized in that fashion. And it'd be interesting to see if that's going to bend to that type of paradigm shift.
I will give you one example. One of my clients was a large defense contractor who, this was my introduction to using the statistical tools and the establishment of the 95% confidence interval as our benchmark. That's how I learned about it. Is my client said, by the way, when you do your asbestos final clearance samples, we need to meet this standard. And they gave us a spreadsheet and said, this is how we want everything documented and used. And so just passing the final clearance level was not good enough. It had to meet that statistical threshold.
I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I would encourage you to tell your client to publish that. Because I can tell you there's a lot of people, they won't. That's the problem, is we know people probably are doing the right thing, but we unfortunately, we're not getting enough, actual proof of it. And so it's tough. It's tough going in that regard. So now I'm going to throw you a complete curveball. So be prepared.
Okay.
What?
AIHA connects. What was the thinking on that? Could you give us a little background on how we got from AIHCE to AIHA connects?
Okay, so AIHA Connect was the culmination of a lot of rebranding effort, and what AIHCE, EXP, alphabet soup name didn't really convey what the meeting was all about.
Got it. Okay.
And when we polled our membership about what conference meant to them and what we should call it, it really resonated that it was connection. It was an opportunity for people in our profession to get together. It was the educational content. It was the networking. It was the PDCs. It was the expo. It was all about connection, and that really was the better name than the alphabet soup of the past.
Okay, that's good. I think that has to be conveyed to the members I think you've already started doing that, but it even more so, I think, as time goes on, because industrial hygienists, although they're scientists, are also very, shall we say, non-responsive to change. I guess they don't embrace it. Let's put it that way.
It's interesting. That one I would go back to. I think the dynamics of the different age groups come into play. I think some of us seasoned veterans are resistant to change, but I think the early career and the early new members, what we were doing wasn't working very well for them, and I think they will accept that change and delight in it. It really is a connection between all of us, and that's what's important.
I absolutely agree with you. The way you explained it makes perfect sense to me, and I'm one of the seasoned veterans, as they say. But
well seasoned.
Yes, thank you. You have to turn it over, put them on the other side now. But basically, the hallway conversations, after the technical committee meetings, the subcommittee meetings, the dinners out, the luncheons, all those discussions, all packaged into one, is working well for the members. And I think the AIHA Connect can basically convey that better than as you said, the alphabet soup that we had before. So
yeah, I mean, it is certainly, I think it's better because AIHCE never rolled off my tongue all that well. I mean, I'll be honest, and there is a lot in the name, from a marketing standpoint, and it's just, I think, Michelle, not nothing against what AIHA has done in the past. It's just evolution. It's just you're moving forward, things change, people's attitudes change, and you have to constantly refresh your brand and to keep people attracted.
Right. And we are really trying to attract new people, and not just seasoned industrial hygienists, but the EHS generalist, or the people that are in other areas and now are being asked to do some industrial hygiene work. And what kind of training do they need? What resources do they need to move forward? And also looking at community. I mean, one of the things that changed with AIHA's mission statement is to add community as an element of our mission and who we are protecting, because it's just a natural extension of the public health role that we fill. We want all workers to go home safe. We want them to be safe in their communities, and I think that means that we need more people that are aware of the tools that we offer in the practice of industrial hygiene and how we can keep people safe.
Great. Well, we were out of time, and we really appreciate you being here, Michelle. It's been very enlightening, and we really appreciate your efforts and as the CIH on the staff, for all of us who are now represented by somebody who's been in the field. So it's a good thing. Thank you very much for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
So Michelle, thanks for joining us. I'm going to flip to a graphic on just AIHA's site again, because it makes sense, right? And if you want to learn more, go to aiha.org.
Sounds good. And just a plug for our next presentation will be on October 20th. It's going to be Max Sherman and Bill Bonfleck talking about ASHRAE's new standard 241 about controlling bioaerosols. So Michelle, you're certainly invited to come as well as a guest. So, but we're looking forward to a very lively session. If you know those two gentlemen, Bob and I will get a word in edgewise occasionally, but they'll be mainly talking. So good to see you.
That'll be great. And AIHA does have its IAQ task force that it just started. And I think the open call might still be accessible to people who are interested. And this is in direct response to how we can communicate better between us and ASHRAE with the new 241 standard.
Not to plug in for me, but basically I've been asked to be the chair of that particular committee. So it should be an interesting discussion. Hey, I'm retired. Yeah, completely retired. That's why I can do this.
I'm never going to pretend to be retired though, Don.
No, there you go.
So we are out of time. And other thing, keep your eyes open too. Today, when we release the recording of this show, obviously many of you watched it live, but we will have the recording up on the online community platform, global.healthyindoors.com. That's where all the shows reside under the Indoor Environment Show tab. Anyway, when that's up, we have a bonus episode back at when it was still AIHCE. Back in Phoenix, the 23 edition, Don and I interviewed the president of AIHA, Dina Siegel, and the CEO. I'm Larry Sloan. I'm stumbling here because I'm going extemporaneous. But we actually have about a 30-minute interview with them that will also be packaged with this one. So
Great.
There you go.
Just the final word. This particular hour is sponsored by both Indoor Environmental Quality Global Alliance and AIHA, American Industrial Hygiene Association. Thank you to both those entities. All right, thank you.
Yeah, there we go. So without further ado, we'll see you in 30 days, and definitely check out all our back programs and the audio podcast.